Welcome guys to another video of Professor's Opinion. And I'm gonna make this video pretty short and it's gonna be focused on India and Bangladesh and Pakistan. So if you guys are not interested in those three countries, you can leave right now. But yeah, so I'm gonna give a wild prediction, which is that in my view, India wants Jamaat-E-Islami party to come to power in Bangladesh, the Islamist party. uh, to come to power in Bangladesh next year, in Bangladesh's election next year in February 2026. So now you might say, okay, that's a very wild prediction. What makes you think that? Well, you have to, I think you're trying to compare something. First of all, you have to understand that Modi has a very strong relationship and solid and reliable relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu. And there's enough evidence to suggest that Netanyahu funded Hamas to come to power in Gaza long time ago, 10, 15, 20 years back, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if Modi is now secretly funding Jamaat-E-Islami to come to power in Bangladesh because it's a very good excuse to launch a war against Bangladesh. That's the simple answer. Okay, if you're a country that appears to promote peace like India, launching a war, full-scale war, land invasion, is gonna be a hard sell to the international community unless unless you bring an Islamist force into power in the country that you're planning to invade. Then it's pretty easy to sell that invasion, that war to the international, the Western countries who are probably going to be funding that war for you, sending you all their technological equipments, right? The Western military latest equipments, right? And I'm sure India would want to get their hands on the latest Western-made military technologies because I know people say India has a very solid relationship with Russia, but I highly doubt Vladimir Putin will sacrifice his relationship with President Xi of China for a country like India. Because you have to understand, India and Russia are not neighbors. China and Russia are neighbors. Again, Russia, being the biggest country in the world, would want to focus on the priorities and the needs of its uh, big neighbor China over the needs of India. So, and India understands this. It's a double-edged sword, right? Like India understands the game too, and that's why they're also cozying up to USA recently. Because India understands that if push comes to shove, Russia will take orders from China in deciding what weapons to send to India, right? If there's a war between India and Pakistan or India and Bangladesh, or India and China in the Ladakh in the northern parts of India. So now India is in a very fragile bind because Russia can't, even if Russia likes India on a government to government or people to people level, they have their hands are tied between China, between what China wants out of Russia, between China's demands regarding India. And on the other hand, US is not necessarily completely on board with a country like India because they don't like to be the puppet of USA, yeah, because India likes autonomy, because they've been colonized for almost ever since until the 1950s by the British. So India is very sensitive to external influence in its countries, obvious for obvious reasons, and US understands that. And so it's not like US completely is in love with India either. Okay, and Trump proved that recently by cozying up to Pakistan and Bangladesh over India. So India is in a tight spot because their only solid allies, if you think about it, the only solid allies India has in the world are Israel and maybe a few countries in Europe that completely hate Muslims or whatever, Asians, or China, whatever. But other than that, I mean, even African countries don't really like Indians. I've been to a lot of African countries, and yeah, they don't like Indians, and so you have to keep that in mind. So India understands this very well, and that is why they're not launching a full-scale war against Bangladesh anytime soon. But if they have to, and I'm sure Modi is preparing for that because he understands he's not doing well nationally in the polls, so he needs a war to bring back the people's patriotism, the Hindu nationalism. And he's going to do that by bringing an Islamist force into power in Bangladesh. I mean, that would be the easiest way for Modi to play this game, the next few moves in this game of geopolitics, right? So, in that, so my prediction is Jamaat-E-Islam is going to come to power next year, not as a puppet of any country. Jamaat-E-Islam is a very popular movement in Bangladesh right now. I'll just say that over right here. So, it's not like Jamaat is going to come to power because they're going to be funded by some country. No, but their coming to power will be extremely beneficial, situationally speaking, to some countries like India. Okay. And yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if India becomes more aggressive towards Bangladesh after Jamaat Islami eventually wins the election next year in Feb. So that's my prediction for India-Bangladesh relationships. There will be a war in Southeast Asia, a big war. And I think that war will lead to the dissolution of the Indian state. They'll just be divided into smaller colonies, smaller princely states, like they were before the British came. You have to understand, India, Bharat, or whatever you want to call it, did never existed. Okay, the Mughals came here, they were all princely independent states, okay, and some autonomous regions where tribal people lived. And Mughals turned that into a state. And then the British came and they just took over the Mughals' positions. And then India was formed as the leftover remaining of what the Mughals and the British, the bureaucratic system created by the Mughals and the British. That remnant basically formed the new Indian government. So in that situation, you have to understand India before the last 300, 400 years, if you go before that, India was never a state, uh, a diverse one country, multiple states, 1.4, it was always loosely independent princely states, which each have like each of them having their own autonomy and their own state level sovereign decision making. So now you might ask yourself, well, India is a big economy. How will they lose a war against a country like Bangladesh? Because China and Pakistan will help. That's my take. That's my prediction. And they will help because it helps their individual needs more than because it helps Bangladesh. You have to understand, an enemy's enemy is my friend. Okay, so I think China wants to take back a large part of the eastern states of India, the Seven Sisters, the Arunachal Pradesh, and then Bangladesh have some claims in the southern states in the eastern part of India, like Assam, then Tripura, and also in Bihar and Murshidabad. Bangladesh has historical claims because there have been historically Bengali populations with Bengali cultures that were just given to India based on a religious survey. Um, Yeah, so there is China's personal benefits to helping Bangladesh because then they can launch the invasion into Ladakh, into Arunachal Pradesh, and get back those lands that are so-called, not so-called, I wouldn't say so-called. I mean, China has historical claims over them, part of Tibet, right? So that's that. And then you go to Pakistan, they have claims over Kashmir and in some small minor claims around the border with India. And also Pakistan has claims to big parts of Afghanistan. Okay. And here again, we have to go through history because when the Mughals were in power in India, Afghanistan existed only as a transit hub between India and Persia, current day Iran. Okay. Afghanistan was never allowed to be a strong, independent, state-run government system. Okay. It was always a fractured transit hub between Southeast Asia and Central Asia, Persia. So I think Pakistan would want to go back to that. They don't want a strong, independent Afghan government, and they have their reasons too. And yeah, I mean, I think China will have their eyes on the Bagram base in northern Afghanistan. So this is where you see the merging of interests, as we call them, merging of self-interests, okay, between China, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, to just redraw these maps, get more for themselves, and live in peace. And I think for that reason, both Pakistan and China wants Jamaat Islami to come to power as well. So you have a weird situation where countries that hate Jamaat, like India, wants them to come to power for not so obvious reasons, right? Like I explained right now. And then you have a situation where obviously countries that support Jamaat also wants them to come to power. But I think the counterback that I've been getting so far is then why is BNP doing so well in the polls, right? The Bangladesh National Party. If the polls decided the election, there wouldn't be an election. So, and yes, BNP is popular because they're established party. Okay, when you're an established party, you already have the networks built within the military, the government, and everything else, right? When you're an established party for that long, like BNP. But I think the upcoming election, the Bengali people, especially the lower middle class and the poor, they understand that only Jamaat-E-Islam will serve their needs. Okay. And yeah, they understand that. So I think in the next election, you'll have Jamaat-E-Islami coming to power, in my opinion, and there will be a war a few years after that. I don't think India will invade uh, in the beginning. I think India will give Jamaat a 1 to 2 years of chance before they start aggressive actions, military actions. But I'm confident that China will by then. So now let's think about China. What does China want here? Would China want India to be occupied in a war with Pakistan and Bangladesh while China fights Taiwan? And then China gets rid of Taiwan sovereignty, and then by then India is weakened with its fight with Bangladesh and Pakistan, and then China can just swoop in and take Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. Would China want that? Would that be the best strategy for China? Yes. And I think that's the way China wants to go. I think what you're gonna see is a very systematically coordinated war where China launching an invasion for against Taiwan and Japan and South Korea, um, the vassal states of Japan and South Korea, the US vassal states, will coincide with Bangladesh and Pakistan launching a war against India, right? So in that situation, it's pretty obvious that India will face the first fight with Pakistan, a very low fight. Like it'll be easier for India in the beginning, but once China is done with Taiwan and South Korea and Japan, and China swoops into India, then it'll get hard. But by then, India will be tired of fighting with Bangladesh and Pakistan. So I think that's the current geopolitical chessboard going on in the world. And so if you're a trader, for example, in China or Bangladesh or Pakistan, you'd want to build stronger ties with Pakistan and Bangladesh because these are the probably the countries you'd want to trade with in the future, right? So yeah, that's it for this one. I'll keep you guys updated and until next time, peace.